I love on Fridays to talk to the committee about what our takeaway from this week of information and trading, information in the market, price action. What do we take away, do you think, from this week in which we set some new records again?
I mean, it's clear that the momentum continues to be to the upside. It seems that this market is almost unstoppable. It's funny, Scott. I'm lying in bed last night at 10:15, and my phone rings, and it's Lee Cooperman calling me, and he said, "The legend, perhaps one of the best."
This is a humble brag.
Best investors of our time. He says, listen, I'm having one of the best years of my life on a relative basis. Stocks are doing great, easy to find great things to do. However, this reminds me of late 99. He went on to read me something that he calls God's plan from Warren Buffett that he wrote in November of 99. And what I would say is, while we're in a great time now, we don't know what the pivot point out might be. Earnings have been revised up. There's a lot of good news that's happening, no doubt. However, you have to be mindful of valuations, which are back at nearly all-time highs. And so our message for investors has been one of balance, right? One of starting to think, as he's thinking, about some of the value names that we can buy and the pivots that you can make away from these with seemingly unstoppable growth names. We saw this week some of those moves, some moves in the small cap, right? And so I think if you stay nimble on your feet, you'll be able to make the pivot when the time comes. But for now, I think it's more of the same because of momentum, and we'll see what happens as the year progresses.
What I learned this week to put forth into the conversation was from Rick Reeder, who joined me on Closing Bell, and Brenda declared this to be an amazing investing environment, perhaps one of the best ever across a variety of different asset classes. He addressed the issue of valuation and said if you can have a problem with it, it's a little stretched in certain places, but if you look to where the earnings growth is really coming from and the most powerful transformative technology that we've seen in decades in terms of AI, that it's not so out of whack. And this is, in fact, a great environment to be an investor in all sorts of different places. Do you agree?
I do think that, at the margin, we've gotten a lot of good news, as Rob mentioned, but particularly about corporate earnings. So Rick Reeder, I think, is exactly right. Corporate earnings are incredibly strong. That's great news. Bond yields should be coming down at the margin, although maybe not as much as some are anticipating. But I do think there are some other things that are complicating the story that we learned this week, particularly about inflation and how that's being passed along or not. So I still think there are some question marks about how that works itself out over the longer term, because I think we've been in an environment where there's been so much uncertainty about the level of tariffs, the timing of tariffs, that a lot of companies probably chose to absorb some of those initial costs if they were experiencing them. But as we get more certainty, I think we might see that passed along to the consumer at a later date when things become more solidified. But it doesn't take away from the overarching story, right, that we are in an incredible period of technological innovation. For the time being, everyone's going to assume it's amazing until proven otherwise. So I think we're still in that sweet spot where valuation can stay elevated. And to your point, Scott, and it's being driven by really solid earnings.
I wonder, Josh, if we also learned that maybe I don't know if it's a euphoric perspective, but this idea that now is finally a great moment for the broadening trade. Because if you looked at the activity in small caps as a barometer of that, they went nuts this week. They were up, the Russell is, as in the they. The Russell was up 5%, okay? It's only up 3 today in total for this week, but it shows you exactly what has happened, whereas some say it was a false breakout. Is that the takeaway?
Not mine. Today is the risk-off day. And I know, like, the layperson will open up their CNBC app or look at what the market did, and they'll say, oh, the Dow is up. The Dow is up because United Health is a $300 stock, and it's price-weighted index, which means the companies that have a nominally high price, like a multi-$100 stock price, have a much larger effect on it than the companies that trade at $40 a share, $50 a share. I know professionals watching this know this, but I'm sharing this for everyone else. But look at the top 3 sectors today: healthcare, energy, and real estate. Those have been risk off. Real estate because of the high dividends. Yeah. Energy sort of as like a hedge just in case the inflation picture isn't getting better. And healthcare is healthcare. Tech is down. And we had a major earnings warning, which I know we'll get to a little bit later in the show, from a bellwether in the chip sector. And I don't see euphoria, Judge, to answer your question directly. And I would also say, like, be careful.
It's probably not the right word. I'm going to interrupt you for a second. The clapping, by the way, you're hearing is because of the tradition on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Whenever servicemen and women of our great country are here on the floor, everybody sort of gathers and claps them around and gives a handshake to everybody, and we salute everybody, of course, for their service to our country. But I just want to let you know what you were listening to. Maybe euphoric is the wrong word, but we're trying to think of the switch in sentiment that seemed to happen, Jenny, almost overnight in this small cap broadening idea, and it was an excitable moment in time that I'm finding maybe questioned as we end the week.
Maybe. So when I look at it, I'm always honed in on the dividend index. So if we look at DVY, which is an ETF that represents dividends, that was up 1.5% this week. Then on the other hand, you have QQQ is up 0.22. So everything's still good, but there does seem to be a leadership shift happening. And then when we think about that on a more granular level today, and we juxtapose AMAT with UNH, which I know we'll get to later, I just think it's really representative of what's going on, which an AMAT was up before today, like 15, 16, 17% on the year, having a perfectly good year. They miss a little on guidance, and it's all erased. Whereas UNH, you had a terrible year, and one little thing, a couple people saying, hey, we're owning this.
Yeah, just a little thing.
You know what? I think it is a little thing.
Yeah, okay.
I think it is a little thing.
Okay.
And so a little thing, and it drives the stock up 12%. And the reason I think it's a little thing is because obviously that was a value. Like, obviously some of the big guys have been quietly picking it up. But now that it's out there, the stock shoots up 12%. But the point being, that to me is like the granular stock level example of what went on bigger in the bigger picture this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if that continues.